Well, thank you all for joining us today for DFW SEM's July meeting. We are super excited to have y'all here. This is our 18th year for joining us today. Yeah. So now that we've got everything muted, we're kicking off or I guess we're in the middle of our 18th year of search engine marketing. I always like to point out that this would not be possible without a bunch of wonderful people. This will be my last time in person as I am moving down to Houston this month. But we've also got our treasurer, Barb Peters, who's virtual today, our secretary, Jenna Williams, who will be live tweeting, our VP of State of Search and Hospitality, Chris O'Connor. Chris is putting on a fantastic State of Search conference this year, so you should come. It's going to be a really good conference. We've got a fantastic lineup. Our VP of Membership and Registration, Kevin Adams, our VP of Sponsorship, Jordan Pearson, joining us virtually, our VP of Communications and Master AV Wizard, Casey Watkins, and then our board member at large and one of our biggest virtual friends who's actually in person today, and that is Tim Shane. And if you want to help make DFW SEM the great organization that it is today, let us know. We always love volunteers, and we've definitely got a job for you. And a big thank you to City Central, who helped sponsor this event space. If you're looking for a co-working space, DFW SEM members actually get a discount. So let us know, and we can hook you up with that discount. Other discounts that one of the board members might be able to hook you up with is our State of Search discount. Now, members always get a discount on the State of Search conference, but we've got a fantastic lineup this year. Here are just some of the faces that you'll see. We've got Joy Hawkins, who is one of the queens of local SEO. We've got Greg Gifford back. We've got Ruth Burreedy, who's always a crowd favorite. So super fun conference, and it's going to be up in Richardson this year. We've also got some great keynotes. We've got Bill Hartzer, one of our founding members, Jeremy Best, who is a video superstar, and then we've also got Fanny Dunnigan, who has spoken with us before, and we love her as well. So, like I said, having a membership gets you a discount to State of Search. So if you want to take care of two things with one, contact one of us if you want a membership. And if you're hiring or looking for a job, we've also got a job board. So let us know, and we'd be happy to post that for you. Next month, we're going to have John McAlpin, and he will be virtual talking to us about entity optimization, the next big thing in search engine optimization, because it's no longer about keywords. And now I'll hand it over to Shelley.
And you're going to have to show me how to go forward and backwards. Yeah. And here we go. Great. All right.
And then just press the keypad. And the camera's right over there.
Okay. Can you see me if I'm standing right here?
Do you want us to move this around any?
No, I just want to be able to see it, even though,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we good? Are we good? All right. So I'm curious about why you're here. Because the topic is coming out of sabbatical and going into the SEM world. So I got a little bit of your story. I'm sure some of you are here because you're board members, and you're setting up the room. But anybody else want to tell me, what do you want to get out of this? And if we have a chat, if we have anybody in chat who wants to tell me, I'd like to know.
Well, Beth says, hey, Shelley.
Oh, hey, Beth.
But why am I here? Well, yes, I'm on the board, but it's interesting. It's an interesting topic, that you go on sabbatical and then you go back into the world. So why? Why would you do that?
Why? Well, that's part of the story, right?
Yeah.
Right.
After 22 years, if I ever leave the industry, what would it be like going back?
Okay. You know what? That's a good way of thinking about it. Yeah.
Most people I talk to, they can't relate with the digital marketing world. That you stepped out and then stepped back in, so you have a perspective that the average person can't share.
True.
My husband's a pilot, and I want to learn more about being able to work from wherever.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's talk then. So I'll just kind of give you an idea of what I'm going to go over tonight. Why I went on sabbatical, the RV life, becoming a minimalist. That's hard to say. The internet connectivity challenges. I've already talked to several of you about that, and you kind of want to hear more about that, and how I managed that. What it was like to work and volunteer on the road. Also, I'm going to tell you a little bit about renting an office the size of a closet in a 100-year-old building. That was really interesting. Why I'm back, what that story is, what's changed about SEM. I think most of you already know that, but I can tell you from my perspective because it's kind of interesting. And then, what it's been like to actually find a job coming out of sabbatical, not having an address. There's a lot of really interesting challenges that I faced personally that you might want to think about, like if you do happen to go on your own sabbatical. And then also what's changed, because my career goals have definitely changed. So this was me back in the day. I've already had people fussing at me because I didn't wear my cowboy hat. But I gave them away. I had 3 of them, and I gave them to my niece. So I don't even have them anymore. I do have the boots on, but no hats. So 2014, I was working for an agency. I had a bad feeling, and sure enough, got called in on a Friday. And I was the first one to be called in. And so they were actually getting ready to take a whole group of people back into another room and do like sort of a mass layoff. And almost half of the office got laid off probably like within a week. So not exactly something I was ready to come home and tell my husband. This was not exactly what I anticipated. I did not anticipate a sabbatical. I did not anticipate a vacation. I really thought I was going to go right back to work. I mean, that's really what I thought. But I needed a break. And a lot of people don't know that I actually got laid off 4 times in 2 years. That's a lot. Mentally, emotionally, that was a lot. So it was kind of nice, to just take a little bit of a break. The timing was really good. My youngest son was a senior in high school, and he was wrestling. He wanted to go to college and wrestle. So, it was kind of a good time. And so after a couple of weeks, we decided, we made the decision I would not go on unemployment. That's a big deal, and so just like that, went from 6 figures to 0 for me. And we didn't really know, is this going to work financially? That's a big, big deal. So the question was, can we make it work? And we did. So I love this meme. It's happiness or minimalism. Corporate needs you to find the differences between the pictures. Well, they're actually the same. For me, it was the same. I didn't really, I didn't set out to be a minimalist. That wasn't even part of the plan either. But I'll tell you why that happened too. So here's my little guy. His name is Austin. And Austin had about a 3/4 ride to Minnesota State. So mom and daddy are pretty proud. We are packing up his stuff. We're getting ready for him to move, up north. And then this happened. He won a national championship, and Andre Metzger actually coached him to that championship. And so the brakes went on the Minnesota State. Andre talked Austin into going to UNT because he was going to set up a new program for wrestling. They weren't D1. You have to be club for a couple of years. But Austin was going to get in on the ground floor. So literally within weeks, we're scrambling now to get him into UNT, all the process of that. And so in the middle of that, we were also renting an apartment in Frisco because he went to Frisco High School. And our lease came up. And so it's like, what do we do, right? Like he's going to UNT, and all of these factors. I'm not working, am I going to go back to work? There's all these questions. And we looked at each other, my husband and I looked at each other, and we both felt the same thing. We felt these two words: go mobile. Go mobile. And at first we were like, well, I don't know. Does that really mean like an RV? Does it mean like not signing another lease? What does that mean? Right? So my mom reaches out to me and she goes, well, while you're trying to figure it out, we have a 27-foot bumper pool, and it's been out in the pasture for 3 years, but you can borrow it until you figure it out. So my mom and dad moved it. We moved over to an RV site in Aubrey. Before that happened, just to back up just a little bit, so this is July of 2015, right? So this is not quite a year after I got laid off in September of 2014. So in July of 2015, we start giving everything away. I'm literally going room by room and room. And there's actually an organization in Dallas called Exodus, which was very fitting for me, for those of you who really know me. So it was called Exodus, and they took everything. They took our outdoor furniture, they took our bedroom furniture, they took my office furniture, they took decorations, they took bedding, they took pots and pans and dishes. They took everything. It's a really cool. I won't go into the whole Exodus, what it is, but that's pretty much who took everything that we had. And we moved into a 27-foot bumper pool, complete with 3 little mice. But it was one of the scariest things I've ever done, because everything that was left went in a small storage, and it was pretty much just my sentimental stuff. So what we had in the RV or what we had in storage, that was it. That was our life. So the adventure started. It really started in 2014, but it's really starting to kick off now. So this is what our RV life sort of looks like, or looked like at the time. That was not the bumper pool. That was actually the motor home, but you can kind of get a feel for the fact that we really enjoyed it. This was the RV life, winter in Texas versus winter in Kansas. Little different there. There was a 100-gallon propane tank under my bed right there. So, and we drained that booger a couple of times. So anybody here have an RV? Anybody online have an RV? You got to start somewhere, right? Anybody had an RV like at one point in their life, right? Their parents had an RV. Okay, so it is an interesting life. So for any of you that are considering the nomad life, the tiny home, the minimalist, I talked about a yurt. A yurt would be my dream, actually. But if anybody's looking at that or looking at an RV, it is a lifestyle, and you do have to really kind of think about that. So what we did is my husband decided to retire. He had been on the Dallas Fire Department for 31 years. He paid cash with some money that he got right there at retirement. We paid for that motorhome that you saw earlier. We did, there is a little bit of a transition. You kind of have to get used to the life, right? It's very social. People love, they have, a lot of people have dogs. There's actually a lot of kids. You'd be surprised at how many families live in RVs. One of our neighbors had 10 kids and homeschooled. So yeah, imagine that in a 40-foot RV. But I will tell you too, and this might be a deal breaker. This may be why some of you don't even have an RV, but living in an RV in Texas with storms is tough. I will say that. That's probably been the scariest part for me. So how many of you have ever used a laundromat? Okay, did you like it? Was it no, not a good experience? Okay, well, for me it was a good experience because I could get everything, all my laundry done. I could get the dog's bed, my bedding, my sheets, my blankets. I could get all my clothes. I could get my towels done in an hour and a half.
That's funny. That's the only
One
time
and a
I
half
noticed.
hours. I'm in and I am out. And I had a system and I loved it. And it was a very social place. But there is a little bit of humor with trying to get washers, trying to get dryers, some of the things that happen in a laundromat, some of the things you see. It is interesting. Also, this is pretty true about the RV camping, on Instagram versus the reality. I will say that in our travels, we actually did go to some really beautiful places. We stayed on Destin Beach. We stayed in the mountains of Tennessee. We really did have some Instagram moments. Unfortunately, a lot of those places, unless you're going to boondock like out in a state park or something like that, if you're going to have a laundromat and electricity and water and all of that, a lot of those places are really expensive. But it's nice to have the Instagram moments. So we had a little bit of both. Being a minimalist in an RV, there's less stuff, less responsibility. It kind of allowed us to do some things that we couldn't do. Our daily lives were very simple. And also cleaning the RV was super fast. On the downside of being a minimalist in an RV, and I didn't have this up here, but there's very little space. The refrigerator we had was pretty small. The motorhome was a 34 foot, so the refrigerator was small. The pantry was very small. We had to get very creative when it came to food. So we did a lot of shopping more frequently than we would have done before. I used to go to Sam's and Costco. I used to, I had 2 boys, and so did a lot of stocking up and buying in bulk. And you can't do that with an RV. You have to get a pretty creative. You have to get pretty creative when it comes to cooking. I got really good at Dutch oven cooking, and I got really good at. I have a Ninja Foodie. That Ninja Foodie can do anything. It can scramble eggs. It can boil eggs. It can make casseroles. You can do all sorts of things in a Ninja Foodie. It's amazing. You can fry stuff, bake stuff. So we definitely had to get pretty creative when it came to some of these types of things. And again, it's like it's the give and take, right? You have a home and your big kitchen, or you have a place where you open the door and you feed the ducks the next morning and you listen to the waves lap and they're just 20 yards from your door, or it's kind of the one or the other. That's why some people have RVs and they just travel with them, right? And that's a good thing to do if you're kind of thinking about being a nomad or you're thinking about a sabbatical. It might be good just to borrow somebody's RV, go on a week-long vacation, just see how you feel about it. Also, I really highly encourage you to go on Airbnb. They have tons of tiny homes. They even have RVs that you can rent. And so, you might just be able to do that and just get a little feel for it. We're going to talk a little bit more about connectivity here too, and that would also give you an idea of what it might be like to work and actually take your computer and your hotspot and all of those things and actually work out of your RV. I will tell you that COVID-19, the lockdown was not fun in an RV. It was not. We were stuck. The place that we were staying would not let us even have an outdoor hot dog barbecue with our neighbors. So we could walk down the street and wave. We could not congregate at all, even outside. Traveling. We did get to travel. It also allowed us to not only travel the U.S., but we also got to take that RV and park it in a few family driveways. We did that with my parents. We did that with his parents. That was nice. I know a lot of you, not many of you actually are as old as I am, but when your parents get older, sometimes they have health issues, and so a lot of times you have to get creative when it comes to just taking care of them. And that could be a really short season, maybe a week or a month, but that could be a long season too. And so we actually found, we ended up in Andy's parents' home not in their home, but in their driveway for about 3 months because both of them had ended up in the ER, and then there was some caretaking that was involved. And it was really nice. We actually converted and put a 50 amp, so all we had to do was just plug in the backyard. We also learned how to boondock. Anybody know what boondocking is? Okay, so boondocking with an RV is when you don't plug in somewhere. There's no electricity. You're not stopping somewhere like a KOA where there's a bathroom and a shower. There's no running water. You're just contained within your RV. And so it's nice if you have a generator, because your generator can create, electricity for you. You can run your air conditioner, your heater. You can you also have a water pump, so you can take a shower, you can wash dishes. You have a water tank actually on your RV. So we would do that. And Cracker Barrel's where we ended up staying a lot. I do recommend, though, that there are some really wonderful websites out there for boondocking. When we would travel, we didn't do a lot of travel planning, and that's unusual for me. Like, I really like to be very detailed. We're going to go here. We're going to stay 3 days. This is where we're going to eat dinner. That's me. But I wasn't married to somebody like that, and so we did a lot of spontaneous travel. And so boondocking was something that we actually did a lot. So we had a website that we went to, and we could tell like where we couldn't boondock, where it was boondock friendly, and those types of things. And those websites change frequently, so it's just good just to Google them. And if you like to sleep in your own bed, that's one of the perks of living in an RV, is you just take your bed with you. So, that was one of the nice things about living in it. Here's a little bit of our travels. We have Destin. We went to Lebanon, Kansas, which is the center of the United States. That was Washington, D.C. and Washington, D.C. And you can see we don't have Franny anymore. She's gone on, but she was one of our travel companions. And one of the nice things about living in an RV is your kids can't come home, so that was their place to stay. Over there on the left. So they brought their tent and their air mattress, and so that's where they stayed. These are my parents, and their house was some beautiful time with them. This was Andy's parents out in the backyard at their place. And then my youngest son actually went to Army, so it was so nice. They had a beautiful campground that's not far, from where he was going to boot camp. And so we would go back and forth to the RV campsite at Fort Benning. And I told you a little bit about cooking and laundry. I kind of jumped ahead, but smaller refrigerators, you've got to shop a little bit more frequently. We got creative. I did actually stay in one place long enough to plant a garden, which I really liked. I also had hummingbird feeders. I don't have any pictures of them, but that was one of my luxuries. I really loved getting up and watching the hummingbirds every morning with the hummingbird feeders. I had a lot less clothes. That is something, from the minimalist part. When in 2015, we had this huge walk-in closet. And then even in my office bedroom, I had another closet. And so I had to go through that and put everything in a space about this big for 2 people. And not a full length either. So below that was the drawers. And we would be creatively coming up with bins and under the bed and under the couch. There was all sorts of creative storage, especially for clothing. We typically kept seasonal clothing in storage. So anything that was long winter coats and hoodie jackets, that type of thing, if it was summer, it was in storage. In the winter, we pulled it out and we swapped it out. Internet connectivity. So I know a lot of you are here for this specifically. And what were the challenges? So every campground you go to will have free Wi-Fi. Every single one of them. And I would probably be willing to lay down $100 that you're not going to get it to work. I don't know that we ever went anywhere And I don't care whether it was a state or a luxury or a low end. It really didn't matter. There's just something about RV parks that they just don't really care about Wi-Fi. They just don't. So Wi-Fi was definitely a challenge. So how did I manage? This was really interesting for me because, I mean, having been in search engine marketing, I was in an apartment in Frisco for those last 4 years when I was working the different agencies, and I had cable. I mean, everything's high speed, everything's instant access. And then when we moved into that 27-foot bumper pool into an RV park with no Wi-Fi and minimal cellular service, we were like, oh, what do we do, right? So the first thing I did was I actually went and I got a hotspot. And I did use that hotspot about 1.5 years. I will tell you the challenges of a hotspot. You can burn up your data really fast. So just be aware of that, especially if you're in heavy like graphics or even like Google AdWords where there's big files, kind of going back and forth. You just need to be aware that even with a hotspot, it could pull that data pretty fast. In September 27, we actually moved to Kansas for about 1.5 years where we were working on a mission, and there was no cell service. So hotspot wasn't even an option for us, but thankfully, what they did was they turned the cable internet on in the building, and so we survived on cellular Wi-Fi and Wi-Fi within the building. So that's what we survived on for 1.5 years. In January 2019, we came back to Texas, back to another RV park, no Wi-Fi, spotty cell service, and that's when I ended up having to just get creative. So what I learned to do was I learned how to work at coffee shops, at friends' houses. There was one gym, that I worked that had couches in the gym, and I would sit on the couches. So sometimes you just have to get creative. You just have to get creative.
Quick question.
Yes,
Did you use a VPN?
I do. I actually did, and I do. Yes, very important to me. Especially, I would not have ever even got on an RV campsite Wi-Fi, even if it was just a trickle of service, without a VPN. Yeah, definitely set up any security you could possibly set up before you plug into any free Wi-Fi. There were definitely issues with that.
Sounds like affiliates. Sorry. A lot of sketchy like things like people do.
Yes. Yeah. I don't want to make RV camps out as if it's a really sketchy place to live, because it really wasn't. There were sketchy people there, but that's not the majority. The majority were a lot of people who were on sabbatical, people who were retired, people who were traveling. And we knew a lot of people who would go north in the summer, come south in the winter. So there was a really wide variety of people. There were people that sold their house. They were in interim. They were waiting on their house to be built. The stories of people who actually stay in RV camps or people who are nomads, it's really interesting how many people, what happens. Divorce happens, all sorts of things happen, right?
Just the occasional person that like scam people and that was their thing.
Yes. So it's just like anywhere else. It's like even in your neighborhood, right? You want to be careful about who your neighbors are. I mean, we ran into that when we lived in our own home. We had a neighbor that was kind of sketchy. So yeah, it's just like anywhere else. You just kind of want to just common sense, I guess. Yeah. Any other questions up to this point?
Yeah, did you have like a smartphone with you, or were you just like flip phone? I mean, what are we talking about? Like,
Oh, so
laptop,
I don't
tablet?
have. So in 2016, I got a new phone. We went to a new cellular service. We started off with AT&T and the hotspot from AT&T. In 2016, I went to T-Mobile, and so T-Mobile comes with the hotspot, on the phone. And so that was my hotspot, was my T-Mobile phone. So yeah, I think this is probably one of those things for people who are considering going in, tiny home, RV, because a lot of tiny homes actually are in RV parks. I don't know if you guys know that or not, but a lot of RV parks are actually converting to tiny home communities because they're already set up. Tiny homes are set up on wheels, and so you just plug them in just like an RV to the water, to the electricity. It's really cool. So, but it's the same problem because you're going to end up in a community where maybe Wi-Fi isn't really reliable. So you're going to have to figure that out on your own.
I mean, were you like going like long periods of time without checking email and stuff?
No, I never got to that point. I never got to the point where like I wasn't able to. I mean, I'm addicted, just like the general public, right? I mean, I never got to the point where I couldn't check my email. I couldn't talk to people. I just had to be more creative when it came to work. If I needed to work on a project, if I needed to do a paper, if I needed to send a heavy, document or graphics or pictures or whatever that was, I had to go somewhere and connect. I actually had a church too that I worked at. They had a foyer, and it was one of those. It was the type of church that you're less traditional. They've got the gym and the daycare and and the youth center and all that. So they convert that big room into the sanctuary on Sunday. So it was that type of a church. And so in the foyer area, they had Wi-Fi. I could actually use the Wi-Fi and tables and chairs. And I would go sit for hours and work at the church. Safe place to work. Nobody bothered me. Had Wi-Fi. It worked out well for me. But yeah, you just have to be creative. Okay. So what was it like? I started off volunteering at Frisco in 2014 with the Frisco High School Wrestling Booster Club. I was already a volunteer there anyway, but boy, I really rolled up my sleeves, got into hospitality. And then in August of 2016, I spent a year working as a volunteer for a part-time for an artifact exhibit in Granbury, Texas. And I've shared a little bit about that. I'll share a little bit more about that. But it just sort of fell in my lap, this opportunity to do this. And so we would actually take the RV down there when they would bring in people in groups and do exhibits, and I would stay. And honestly, it was not all that glamorous. I mean, it really wasn't. It started off, I was showing people where the restroom was. I made coffee. I swept. I turned on a movie. It was very mundane, but that period of time where I volunteered for that 1 year led to a much bigger project for me. So in September 2017, those artifacts actually moved to Kansas. And when they moved, because of our mobility, because we were in the motorhome, we were actually asked if we would go with those artifacts. And so it ended up at a 100-year-old school building. And they were going to renovate that building to be an education center and exhibit those artifacts, kind of a museum/education center, kind of a combination building. So, we told them yes. We took the motorhome up there. I'm going to show you a picture here in a minute. We got there. They were like, "We're ready for you. Come on up." So we get there, and they have a 50-amp plug-in, and that's it. There's no water connection. There isn't a sewer. It's on black dirt. I mean, and that's what we drove up there. So our first responsibility when we got there was bringing in gravel, putting in a sewer system, and then we just sort of rigged our water to get water. But that was really interesting But we were able to do that because we had the motorhome. I mean, we would not have been able to do what we did had we not actually made that decision all the way back in 2015, because that's when we made that decision to go mobile. So fast forward, we're 2 years later, and now we're able to do this because of that decision that we made. So we coordinated with hundreds of volunteers over the next year and a half. We renovated that old building. I learned museum curator skills. I became a very skilled tour guide of these artifacts. It was really fun. And it was definitely the highlight of my spiritual journey. It was that year and a half. What was it like? You can see where he was putting in the sewer system on the left. You can see a little bit of the building in the back. The picture in the middle was the before, and this is the after. So the ministry that we work with is connected to Israel. And so I work with Christians and I work with Jews. And so we do a lot of stuff related to the Bible. So this is supposed to look like a synagogue, like an ancient synagogue. And it actually ended up really nice. I did a lot of admin work. So kind of like some of the types of jobs that I did, I already told you, that I got to be a tour guide, but I did a lot of admin work too. I had an IDF general that I took around and, drove him places. He would give me documents in Hebrew, Arabic, and English, and I would have to transcribe them. And I only know English. That was quite the challenge. Some of my responsibilities were similar to my corporate career. I did a lot of domain searches. We did strategies for outlining for social media marketing. I worked with web designers. I did a lot of fundraising. That was really interesting. That came from, and that's kind of part of this whole DFW SEM board. A lot of my experience came from that. It was really nice to be a part of that in the early 2000s. And so being involved with that, being involved with sports booster clubs. So I just took fundraising to the next level. We were definitely doing a whole new level of fundraising here. And so and we had a lot of creativity too, which is nice to know. One of the first things we needed to test 5 rocks. We needed to kind of do some scientific tests on those rocks, and we needed $100,000 in order to do that. I believe in God. I believe God worked out another arrangement for us. And so instead of $100,000, what happened is we ended up with 2 university professors, an adjunct professor and a graduate student, and 2 different universities who tested those rocks for free for us. So instead of $100,000, we ended up with a creative solution for what we needed. So we had a lot of that happened. So that was really fun in terms of some of the things and the responsibilities that I did and the connections and the ways that we put things together. I did a lot of community outreach. I did not think that I would. I wasn't from Kansas. We had team members in Kansas, and I really thought my team members in Kansas were going to be doing my community outreach. But that's not what happened. So we did Operation Cherry Pies. And so we actually were able to do some really very successful community outreach with some creativity. And so we had a neighbor that we were but through Cherry Pies, we're able to develop a relationship with him. I planned and hosted events for over 100 people. Oh my gosh, could I tell you the craziest stories about that? It was so much fun. And some of the stuff that I got to do was just so fun. I had an IDF general who is, he was brought up Jewish, so he's got a lot of Jewish traditions and that type of thing. And so it's Hanukkah, and he wanted these jelly donuts that are like a Jewish pastry. And and they have a jelly, inside of this donut. I'm in the middle of nowhere, Kansas. So I go to my local Chinese restaurant and I explain to her what we need. And so that's where we got 3 dozen jelly donuts that were supposed to be whatever this was, pastry. It was just fun, lots of fun. I also got to travel. I've been to Israel 3 times. On the left there, you can see me in Egypt. On the right, you can see me in Jordan at Petra. So, that was really one of the most amazing parts of this journey. A lot of this was all related to the ministries that I worked with. All right. we'll come back to the internet connectivity. Can you guys see she's got her computer monitor actually on the table at McDonald's? This is desperate. Um,
That's an oldie.
that was an old monitor, yeah.
Yeah.
I think most of this I've probably covered. That the Wi-Fi and the story, all of that. All right. So in 2019, I really needed a place to work for the ministry. We were back in Texas. Andy's parents were not doing well, so we were here trying to kind of help with them. And so I got the opportunity to work in this 100-year-old building. All he had was this little closet, basically, but I loved it. It was great for me. I wanted to show this because it's so cool, because the ministry that I work with is obviously related to the Jewish culture and the Jewish archaeological finds and history and paintings and mosaics and pottery and coins and all of these cool things. And so you can see this was a mosaic, and this was a mosaic, and you can see on the top of it the seashell. And then this is on the top of the building that I work at. So I kind of wonder, if it has a little bit of Jewish history. I don't know, but it just was a fun place to work. And the Wi-Fi was terrible, of course, right? I mean, that's the whole reason I went there. But I made it work. I absolutely made it work. So by 2016, I was 100% working off my phone. I didn't even have a computer. I didn't have a laptop. We had an iPad, but it was really sort of worthless. So all the work that I was doing was literally off my phone. So what's really cool is in 2019, I was asked to create a new ministry, which is all related to this other stuff that I do. And I was had a laptop, which is the one, not this one, but the one I brought. I had that laptop donated to me, which was just a lifesaver to me. And that's actually the laptop that I work off as well. This office was hot in the winter, or hot in the summer, cold in the winter. Had a love-hate relationship with the Wi-Fi. But if you guys can imagine what it was like to be cooped up in a 34-foot motorhome during the lockdown, I was actually very, very happy to have this office to go to. So it was great. If you're going to travel, I encourage you to research 2022 blogs that give tips for both RVers and for trucker technology, because a lot of truckers have a little bit better technology than the RV community even thinks about for getting online and working, because they're definitely kind of in the same boat. Just make sure that the advice and the technology that they're talking about is actually up to date, because there's a lot of affiliate marketing in the blogs and stuff like that. Just make sure it's up to date. And then here's a couple of options you're going to read about. You're going to read about the traditional phone plan, your AT&T, your T-Mobile, etc. You're going to read about hotspots. You will have options for your phone hotspots, options for device hotspots. There will be Wi-Fi extenders and signal boosters. And I did use actually a signal booster on the RV. That's how we survived while we were in Waxahachie. We wouldn't have made it because we couldn't get any cellular service at all. So we ended up having to buy the cellular booster. Wi-Fi extenders I didn't really use, but there were other people that were in the RV park that did. And they actually were able to get Wi-Fi when I couldn't get Wi-Fi. So I probably should have looked into that. And then satellite. And I will tell you that, satellite sounds really good. It's very expensive, but very few people actually use satellite. I mean, maybe the technology just hasn't quite got to that place where it's reasonable, it's reliable. It's just not quite there yet, but it's definitely an option, for people. So keep an eye on it. Any questions up to that point?
So Beth has one. Isn't the shell related to baptism?
Yes. And other things, but yes.
There you go, Ben.
Did you use Skylink on it all?
Is Skylink the satellite?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I looked into it. I didn't look into it for so much being mobile, but there were a few times where we actually sort of planted. You know, I mean, we weren't. I mean, I'm trying to think. We did go for a really long season where we didn't even move that motorhome. There was just too much family stuff going on. So it's like we travel, go to Kansas, come back, and then because of family, we were parked. So there were times like that I really considered it because it would have been nice to have. But then again, it's like you're in the motorhome. You know, what happens when you pick up and move? Some of those, now I had a neighbor who put the whole dish and everything. I mean, she was planning on being there for a while. She did not end up being there for a while. So now you have a cancellation fee, you know, you had your whole setup fee and all of that. So yeah, there's all these different ways that you can think about it. I'm obviously not in the motorhome anymore, but if I was going to do all of this over again, I think what I would have thought about differently is I think I would have wanted a home base. I would have wanted a home base where I would have had Wi-Fi, whether that was satellite or cable or traditional, stable, whatever that was, and then traveled from that home base. And then I would have had a place to put my memories and hang up my pictures, you know, and some things that I really missed. You know, I mean, when you're in the motorhome, you don't have a place to put your pictures, you know, or things like that. So there's definitely some, I mean, all my memorabilia was in boxes. So I think that's something that I probably would think about. Why? Why did I come back? And this part's very personal. And I'm going to be very vulnerable. I really haven't stood up in a public format and actually talked about this. But my husband and I got a divorce in February. We would have been together 38 years in March. So life happens, right? And that's why I'm back in the job market. Otherwise, I would probably still be on sabbatical. But I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the changes in my life. I'm happy. I'm doing well. I'm excited about what's in front of me. But divorce just isn't really something that you put on your LinkedIn or your resume. It's not something you put on your cover letter, you know, when you're interviewing. And so when people are talking to you and they're asking you, you know, why are you back? Why are you looking for work now? You know, why would you even want to come back? I mean, what did you call me earlier? Like this whole, this adventure, you know, it was just like, why would you want to leave this, right? I mean, it's just such a cool story and life.
Traveling the world.
Yeah. So, but life happens. And so I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the fact that I'm back. And I'll tell you why I'm back. I like that I'm back because I actually missed SEM. And I did a little bit. I mean, it's not like I've been completely out of search engine marketing, you know, for the last 7.5, 8 years. But I wasn't rolling up my sleeves and really digging in and really, it wasn't that type of immersion like I used to be. And I really kind of missed that. So, I haven't stopped supporting the ministries that I work with. I'm still really excited about what I do, and I still work with them. I still fundraise. I still do teaching, but I am excited to be back because I really do love SEM. I believe it's my calling. I believe it's my passion, and there's just really nothing better than getting completely lost inside of a Google Ads campaign and then you know, patting yourself after it's successful. So this doesn't really reflect how I feel about this, but I did think it was kind of funny. Oh, so what was it like? And I really do have a lot of advice here. So if you ever do decide to take a sabbatical, especially a long sabbatical like the one that I took, um, I do have some things that you need to think about. One of the things I haven't talked about with just being in the RV life or being a nomad in general, it doesn't matter what that looks like, is what you do with mail and your address and voting. There's some very important things here. So there are some ways to handle that. There's a company out there called Escapees, and they'll actually do your mail digitally. So you have a permanent address, you have a place to vote, you have a place to put on your driver's license. They take your mail, they scan it for you. It's all digital, so that's kind of nice. And there's more out there than them. So there are some things like that. But for me, I didn't choose to do that. So I had a post office box, and we used that post office box, and sometimes we would just have people forward our mail to us. But between March of 2021, which is when Andy and I separated, and April of 2022, I didn't have a permanent address. I didn't. And so when I was doing my resume, the ATS, that automated system, that just kind of scans your resume, they weren't looking at the fact that I was willing to relocate. I mean, they weren't reading some of the things that I was putting on that resume. And so I had put my P.O. box originally in Maypearl, but I was looking for jobs in Addison and Plano, in Dallas and Fort Worth. And what I realized was the ATS wasn't even sending, like, my resumes weren't even getting to HR. They just never even got there because I was being culled, because there was probably some sort of perimeter or something like that. And people, even if they did see it, HR just assumed, oh, she's in Maypearl, an hour and a half from Dallas, whatever. She's not going to do this. So then I experimented a little, and I used a friend's address in Granbury. That didn't work either. But then I finally started getting responses when I actually used my sister's address in North Richland Hills. And so because I was more up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area with her, I started getting some hits, on putting out resumes. But really, most of the companies I talked to just really had a problem. They just had a real issue with the fact that I was coming back into the job market. That just did not make sense to them. I did find out that remote jobs right now have been really incredibly competitive, very competitive right now. I happen to be coming back into the job market when everybody else was coming back into the job market. So the timing was really challenging for me. I would highly, highly recommend that you do some old-fashioned getting in front of if you can get in front of people with Zoom, a video, if you can get in front of them in person, absolutely, because you're going to have a much better, more success if you can do that. And then, of course, networking has always worked best for me. But I did want to kind of give you some of the challenges, because if you do decide to take a sabbatical, I would love to hear stories. If somebody does what I did, I would really love for you to connect with me in a year or 2 years or 5 years and just tell me about your story, because I want to know if I inspired you to do that. But I do want you to know some of the challenges that you are going to face, because it's not just, living out of a small closet or a 27-foot, box, or a 34-foot box, or having to do laundry in the laundromat, or Wi-Fi and connectivity issues. But, fast forward, you decide to come back into the job market, you may have some unique challenges. And these are the challenges that I had. So what's changed? Not a lot, actually. It's been really interesting. I'm really surprised that a lot of stuff is the same. Google's doing what Google does. They change the names of things. It's the same thing. They call it something different. Just like, in 2018, Google AdWords went to Google Ads. There are some new features. I really like recommendations, insights, and some of the reporting that's on the new online platform now. E-commerce has really changed a lot over the years. I've been really impressed by that. audience targeting and geographical targeting still feels exactly like it did when I left. But overall, the foundational concepts of paid search just pretty much seem to be the same. So I've felt really comfortable coming back in. You know, I have needed a little help. I call Kevin sometimes, and he answers questions for me. But it's felt really comfortable coming back. We had a client a couple of years ago, and I was really patting myself on the back because like we were able to get great click-through rates, like straight out of the box, like just you know just jump right back on the horse. You know, it was good, felt good. Any questions so far? Any online questions? Anything?
Still wanting to know what the testing of the rocks was.
So we believe that the artifacts that we have came out of Bethlehem Ephrata, which is where Jesus was born. So the question was, were those rocks really from Bethlehem? And they were able to determine that they were. Yes.
And where did you find them?
So they have been stewarded over the years. It's a long, long story. It was actually a movie made for this. But they belong to Israel. They're in the United States. They can't go back because, at least not right now. Maybe someday. But right now they're just being safely stewarded here, which is why we have this educational center so that we can let people see them. And that was what the
That's really
the
cool.
testing. Yes, it's very cool. You can kind of see a little bit of my life. That's where I was working. I love this. I had a rocking outdoor chair, and I would put the fire pit on. That's my dog Roni, and I loved to work outside. I loved working at the picnic table, in my chair. You can see me presenting. Earlier this year, I was doing a presentation for my family. This is me lighting the Hanukkah last December, actually, at the education center that I worked at. And then I've had some really fun stuff that I've been involved in recently. For anybody that's familiar with the red heifer in Numbers 19, then I got recruited into that. So that's been a fun project. If you want to know more about it, just ask me. But what else changed? It changed my perspective about work and meaning and purpose in work. I really don't know that I want to go back to work where it's not meaningful or purposeful to me. And it's not that I couldn't make work meaningful and purposeful regardless, but it's nice to actually have a job that's meaningful. That is something that ideally for me, that's where I'd like to be. The other thing that's changed is when I go in right now and people are talking to me, like, what do you want? Do you want full time? What does that look like? I tell them 32 hours because all of you know that 32 hours is actually 40 hours or more, right? So if you say 40 hours, it's actually probably 50 or more. So for me, I have some really exciting things happening for me in the next year, and I'd like to have a little buffer there, right? 32 hours is plenty for me. It's plenty. And so financially, that works out for me. It works out for me to have more time with my family. So that's another thing that has changed. And honestly, I've been very surprised at how open people have been to having that conversation with me about that. The job that I have now is 32 hours. I'm interviewing with an agency right now, and the position was 40, and they're willing to do the 32. So it's people are open to that. So again, I think what I would like to encourage you is that even if you're not willing to, I mean, it's a big deal to give away everything that you own and then change your life, whether that's living out of a backpack and traveling on trains, or whether that's an RV, or whether that's a tiny house, whatever that looks like. But you can start small. You know, instead of a 40-hour week, drop back to a 32-hour week and take that one day and make it meaningful. Maybe you're not somebody who's going to do ministry, but you could do the food bank. You know, you could work with other local volunteer projects. Oh my goodness, like there's a million opportunities out there, whatever it is that your passion is. And you could take that time that you're no longer putting in work, and you can put it into your passion. If you want to take that next step, take a couple of weeks off a year, or take a month off. If you've been with somebody for a while, or you know you've been with a company for a while, take a month off and go travel and go do something meaningful, something meaningful to you and something meaningful to the world. When I got laid off, I was the vice president of media. I had a small team. I worked a lot of long hours. But fancy titles aren't important to me anymore. They're just not. I don't have to have a VP title. I don't even have to manage anybody. I really don't. It's not that I have to be a loner or I want to be a loner. I actually really enjoy working with teams, but I don't have to manage anybody. That's not necessarily like on my goal, you know, something that I have to have a goal. I've talked about the hours. And no, I'm not overqualified for that position. As a matter of fact, I'd really like to learn new skills. I was telling Mike earlier that I don't even have to stay in search engine marketing. I really have an interest in SEO.
The intersections are
yeah,
pretty much the same thing. You just compartmentalizing how you get the visibility.
Yeah. And you know, I've been really fortunate because I started working with Rob Garner in 2007, and then Rob Garner and I were on the board together, and then I connected with him again at Advice Interactive, and then Rob and I have also done some contracting, and he is so solid with SEO. So for me to have that relationship and working relationship with him has been wonderful for me to get that really solid SEO foundation. But I was telling Mike earlier that I don't have the know-how to how that works in the practical, you know. It's like theoretically I know how it works and I know how important it is. But, you know, I would love to learn more about that.
Yeah.
So
put in perspective, Rob Gardner, Jim Gilbert, which worked with Key Relevance with Christy Churchill, and Bill Hartzer, who's going to be the keynote for State of Search. They're all like founders of the DFW SEM group, which if you don't know DFW SEM, like my shirt says Dallas Mafia. This is back when we went to Las Vegas years ago, but it's the oldest and you know, one of the starting first search marketing groups in the country of any sort that meets together. So it's pretty impressive that the time of this organization is just, you know, there's a lot of tenure there.
Well, we want them back.
I think Rob is at that place where with me right now,
Yeah,
he's really wanting that meaningful, purposeful, not quite ready for sabbatical yet, but definitely would like to if he could. Yeah. But yeah, so I love learning new things. The job that I have right now, I've been learning HubSpot. So that's been really interesting, setting up emails and sequences and then I haven't quite gotten to Taboola, but that was one that we were going to get to. And then we've been working with Facebook ads and Pinterest ads, you know, so that's been kind of fun. I haven't done those in a long, long time. So it's just been fun for me. I really think that the skills that I have can be applied to a variety of other things. So still looking. If anybody wants to reach out to me later or figure out how to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn. You guys can talk to me. So I'm definitely still available. And Q&A. Any questions?
So Beth just asked, talk about agency versus in-house work. I'm not quite sure what she means by that, but I guess the differences of what it's like to be in-house with a given company or agency.
So I had a consulting company, and so I was sort of the agency, just very, very small. And so I've kind of done all different spectrums. I've had where I had clients and I had employees and we managed accounts. And then for a period of time, I actually didn't do anything but training and consulting. So I didn't have any employees, that was probably the funnest that I did, was during that period where I was doing training and just consulting. And then agency, I really liked working agency. I liked working agency because I really got mentally challenged. There were so many client things that came across, whether it was a client problem, whether we were all huddling together trying to come up with a strategy, or whether we were doing cross-team. I liked cross-team collaboration. So I liked knowing that my little search into marketing team, was actually a part of this. I mean, like our strategy with SEO or our strategy with web development or our strategy with universal business listings, like we were all on the same page. It was really kind of nice to do that collaboration. But obviously it's kind of like living in a home versus living in an RV. You have that give and take, because with the agency, it's probably a clock in, clock out. Now, a lot of them now are doing a lot more work from home, or maybe a couple days a week or something.
Flex.
Yeah, more flex time, which is really nice. But you still have more of that office environment, clock in, clock out. It's just a different style of working. I like them all. I liked working all of them. Tax, from a tax perspective, it's definitely nice to be a consultant or work for yourself. A lot of advantages to that. You can take off, you can travel, you can, there's a lot of things that you can do. I found that really difficult working for agencies. Working for agencies and trying to do family vacations and that type of thing was very challenging for me. Maybe not everybody, but. Anybody want to go on a sabbatical? Even dream about it?
I think I'd go crazy.
I don't know about a sabbatical. I talked about, like, before we wound up having a surprise, the extra one coming along. Almost 22 months now. Anyways, she had talked about like going traveling on RV, like working remotely. And so I was trying to picture these. I'm like, I have no idea how that would work out, like the Wi-Fi situation. So.
I think the bigger challenge for both Kevin and I, because we have kids on both ends of the spectrum, is not having an empty nest.
Yeah.
Because to me, that's like the empty nest lifestyle. Or, I have a 20-year-old still living in my house playing video games at 3 a.m. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're in that world, it's like, it's not so, well, can I leave the 20 and the 18-year-old and take the younger kid, you know what I mean, in my world? But that in itself makes it like something that's almost I'm not ready. I'm not there yet.
I was very encouraged by my neighbors.
With the 10 kids?
Not just, well, not even,
Good.
okay, so they were on the extreme,
Okay.
but they were actually not that rare. There were a lot of families, big families. We had another family that had 8 kids, 6 kids, 8 kids. It was.
It almost sounds like in that circumstance, it's nobility through suffering, as opposed to like purposeful, this is our lifestyle.
Yeah.
Like tiny homing it, To me, it's like when you have that many kids, because I have my 5 kids, I go nuts, right? So that part of it right there, just when you were saying that, I was like,
learn together.
Tingles. I was like, oh, I don't feel good.
Yeah.
You're in an
Yeah.
RV or a tiny home than you would in a regular home, because you have no choice. You can't run to your friend's house next door.
You're probably putting your head on the pillow.
Well,
hiding out.
Did they have the kids before they went RVing? Like,
so there was, I think one couple that I was very inspired by. They had 2 young boys. They were probably 3 and 5. And I just was, they were in their 30s. And they decided to come out of basically kind of like a corporate or traditional, life. And they actually connected with the Assembly of God. They have they call it mappers, I think is what they call it, but it's their mobile missionaries, right? And so what those guys do is they have RV parks, or they'll pull into churches or other places, and then they do remodeling or other types of work, whatever that looks like. And some of those guys coming out are electricians and plumbers and brickers and, or whatever. And he was kind of a general all-around handyman. So, and she did living oils. Is that right? Is that how you say it? It's the essential oils, that you can do from home, kind of your own business kind of thing.
Living well or something like that.
Something like that. So she did that. And so they would move wherever the Assembly of God sent them, which could have been all over the United States. And then you usually stay anywhere from a couple of weeks to several months. And they would circle back to the RV camp that we were at, because the RV camp that we were at was one of them was, not all of them, a lot of them were public, but one of the ones that we really enjoyed staying at was an Assembly of God camp. And so they would circle back and we would see them over and over again. And they had their big Rottweiler dog, and which, is kind of unusual anyway, because you don't see that a lot in RV parks. But anyway, they were just as happy as they could be, and they made it work. I mean, it's not that they made it work, but they enjoyed the lifestyle. So yeah, I think if you're if you're wanting to try it out, it would be better just to rent an RV, and go, rent it and go and stay and see what it's like before you actually do what we did, and because we just literally just jumped off the deep end and just did it. And I don't regret it. I don't regret any of it. But
So when you were paring down clothes, are there areas that you suggest not paring down quite as much, like extra 10 socks or something?
so I
How many days worth of clothes did you keep?
I probably had about a week.
Okay.
Yeah, and then a couple of nice items, that I would dress a little dressier, but not a lot. Not a lot. I mean, I didn't have room for dressy stuff.
Do you, so obviously with modern visual design, right? Things have kind of changed over the last few years. Visual builder tools and websites and all that stuff. It's kind of like really since the old thesis, right? The layer cakes. And so does a minimalist lifestyle equate to making you better at UI, UX when it comes to minimalism and design? So do you think of things differently because you've lived kind of understanding really the basics? Does that change you as a marketer is what I'm asking?
Yeah, I think so. I do. I mean, my whole thought process is different now.
I need to get more of that because I'm loquacious and verbose and Kevin will tell you.
Yeah.
So I need to be more minimalist,
Yeah, like even right now, like I don't have any photos or pictures up yet. It's just been hard, to even think about that, because it just hasn't. It hasn't been something I've thought about now for almost 8 years.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not that I don't want that, but it's just not. I mean, it's like literally like my brain has changed, cooking and everything.
There's a great book that's a sales book. It's called Who Moved My Cheese? Him and Haw. And I'm sure everybody's already seen it at this point, but it's all about how to adapt to change and obviously in a business environment or even a personal one. There's a lot of content on that. But.
Well, and if you think about it, I mean, we're kind of in an interesting world right now, right? And being mobile kind of lets you move, if you need to, if you want to.
Why does your life have to be so stationary?
Well, I think it's opened the world to a lot more people to be able to be mobile because of COVID, really, because a lot of people started traveling more and you can work from home.
Yeah.
So it makes it, and employers are more okay with you working previously, and that wasn't happening.
I
Yeah.
want an RV and a race car to tug around and go to all the drag strips.
Hey,
So
go.
that's gonna happen next year for sure for me.
We actually had a little bit of that lifestyle. That the little guy that, no, actually, it was my oldest. It was my oldest son, raced for a while. So we,
I've been
You know.
doing it forever.
yeah.
Is there less, is it like more apolitical at the RV campgrounds? Or is it, I don't know.
Yeah, do you not want to be there during election season?
It depends on
I
what's.
don't imagine it being any different really
Than
than
anywhere else?
your neighbors.
Yeah.
I feel like it would be different because you have so many different neighbors all the time. And so that's constant change. My ADD brain would just love it, I'm sure.
Well, I don't know that
Well, it
it
says you never met a
changes
stranger.
as
So-
much as you, it's not like a hotel, like it's a nightly change.
No. It.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even
It's
if
not
they're
like
there
a
for weeks on
hotel.
end, they're not
Yeah.
just, okay, I got
Like,
it.
Yeah.
you know, you actually probably make friends with these
Yeah.
people,
Oh,
and
okay.
Yeah.
you know,
And
Yeah.
you keep up in touch with some of them ever?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I've actually got several of them that are long-term friends now, but yeah. So the interesting thing is that like one of the RV parks that we stayed at in Aubrey, it was really nice, and somebody moved in, had a party. Next day, they had pulled that RV up into the parking lot, and they were like, "You're out of here," right? So they don't put up with that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay.
So in a way, it depends. And RV parks are different. I think everybody kind of has this mental perception of what an RV park is like, and they're not all like that. I mean, some are.
it's not like the movies, right?
It's not all trailer park boys, okay?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's.
No, we don't know that reference, but it's pretty bad.
But there's definitely, and even right now, it's really interesting. And matter of fact, if anybody is out there listening, and or even in here, there's a huge opportunity for people to do investments to make to actually do the development of nice RV parks. There's one in Waxahachie, and they were full almost from the day they opened. And they had a business plan, and the business plan basically was they were going to double in size, but they wanted to make sure that they were going to be full, that type of thing. And I mean, they were booked. But it's nice. It's concrete slabs. It's landscaped. There's a tank out back. They've got a fire. It's not really a fire pit. It's more like an outside fireplace, But it's just super nice.
Did you ever do a KOA? Is that what they're called? You know what I'm talking about?
I have done the cabins at KOA. I've never camped at never RV parked.
Yeah. You think of like what franchise RV brand?
Yeah.
Or, type. That's the only one I can think of besides state parks is that WC as well.
Well, and I don't know. I don't think there's a lot of franchises out there.
For that kind of
Yeah, I
business.
think it's mostly individuals that do a development. But boy, if you ever do decide to do that, definitely do your homework, because you can get into a lot of problems if you don't. So
Do one other crazy question, but do they do background checks for you at any? Okay, I didn't think so.
Well,
part of it's probably
I take
anonymity for some
I take
reason.
that back. The Assembly of God did,
Okay.
but we were also, it's a little different environment too. But yeah, the rest of them, no.
Nope, didn't think so.
No, but I will tell you this. I won't tell you which one it was, but we did go to one RV park, and when we called, they were like, we're booked for months, we'll put you on the waiting list. And it was a nice RV park. So we ended up going by and in person, and of course, having been married to Andy at the time, he's telling them I'm a retired Dallas firefighter, blah blah blah, and they took that little application and it went, like right here to the top.
Yeah.
So we were able to get in like in a week.
Yeah.
And we actually learned that trick with other RV parks too.
Face to face, so they trust you.
Mhm. Yeah.
I believe that.
Yeah.
Waiting list at an RV park?
Right.
If it's nice, yeah, because there's just not that many nice RV parks. So actually in Frisco had one RV park that was $1,200 a month.
Gets pricey.
Yeah, and you couldn't get in there, but it was because of that 500 or not 500, the $5 billion mile or whatever it was, but there were all those construction people. And so that's actually why we moved out of Aubrey, because Aubrey started off pretty decent, but then they got really competitive because all those construction people didn't have any other place to go. So
you have like the skill set of being able to lay down sewage lines now?
oh no, I don't. Andy does, but
At least empty them?
yeah. No, I did more of the inside stuff. I helped with the outside, but only with direction. So,
The gatherings of over 100 people, like what were the common like watch out for this kind of?
oh, so that was really funny. The IDF general that I worked with wanted to do. We did this huge Hanukkah. And so that's where you light the candles in the 8 days, and it's this beautiful candelabra. And so I had one of those, and I had it sitting, and we had all these people moving around, and he was having kids light them, and we had them all over the place, and we had I'm trying to think what it was. It was like a fabric fence. And so this fabric fence was kind of separating. And so they had moved away from me, and I was over here just like, oh, that went so well. Everything was so good. And everybody's over there on that side of the fence. And I look over, and one of my Hanukkahs had fallen over and caught like some felt on fire. And I was like, oh. But it was a little nerve-wracking with just so many people and the artifacts, and because some of them are behind glass now, but they weren't at the time. And so it was always like this, like don't step on that, don't stand on that, don't touch that.
It'd be amazing seeing with all these candles.
Yeah,
And fire hazards.
yeah. So that was the only like issue I guess that I had, but it was fun. I mean, if anybody wants to meet me for coffee someday, and I'll be happy to share my photos and stories, and because it's pretty crazy.
You should write a book.
It was really fun. I should.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
People would love to read it.
Well, thank you for coming out. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.